welcome to week 1 of Self-Pleasure for Success. So today I want to talk to you about what self-pleasure looks like to me. And I just want to advise you that although this is a weekly program, you can use this same task as many times as you like over that week. And the beauty of the practice is that every time we do it, it looks a little bit different. So firstly, I want to go into what I see self-pleasure looking like to a lot of the clients that come and see me, and what self-pleasure was like for me growing up. So to start with, self-pleasure for me growing up was pretty much non-existent. I don't think I had my first orgasm until I was in my 20s. Whenever I did try and self-pleasure, I just felt a lot of shame, and I just felt like it was not the right thing to do. And especially growing up in my parents' house, I was felt very restricted in my sexual energy there, and felt like it would have been inappropriate to make any sounds, or and I wouldn't have been able to connect to my breath in any way, and just felt like it was a very unsexual place for me to be at that time in my life. So actually that led me to having my first sexual experiences with partners when I came into my late teenage years, and then from moving out from home, I moved straight in with partners, or I was backpacking as well. So I was always staying in dormitories, and I was staying with partners. So I was either having sex or sleeping in a room with other people, which felt very inappropriate to be masturbating. I had a lot of stories about what was appropriate and what was inappropriate when I was growing up as well, of how I can show up in my sexual energy, and what's okay and what's not okay, and what's dirty and what's seedy, and all these different things. And it's been a really big journey of me actually really eradicating that from my life, and understanding that every part of me and every part of my sexuality is beautiful and deserves space. And that's really what I want to share with you guys over this next few weeks, is understanding what is actually holding you back from your authentic sexual expression. So for me, when I did start to masturbate, it became very goal focused. The only things I'd seen around masturbation was just what my friends had told me. It was all about how quickly can you orgasm, and what's the fastest route, and can you make yourself orgasm. And it was all really focused on this goal of orgasm, and no one had ever explained to me that it could be a process of really learning to be with myself, and transcending my emotions with my sexual energy, or using my sound, breath and movement to create more pleasure in my body. I never knew any of those things existed, and I was never made aware of those things. And then when a few years ago, I was in a very abusive relationship, and the sex life that I had back then was made me go really into my shell. And when I left that relationship, I was quite stuck to know what to do to heal my sexuality and to come back to myself, because when I was growing up, I felt like I had this high libido and this beautiful way of connecting with people, and I lost that through this relationship. So it was this journey of me going, right, so what do I do now? Where do I look? I didn't want to, I had a lot of people in my life that I could talk to, and I could have talk therapy with anybody. But what I wanted to know was how could I explore Tantra with myself? So not long after I had this relationship, I met the partner that I'm with now, and he was a big help in helping me discover how to be with my sexual energy, and he really held space for me to say no, and to hold back when I needed to hold back, and to be in my emotions that were coming up around sexuality. But it was a massive ask for me to create this, to have this relationship with him, and him be giving me the healing that I needed for my sexuality. And what I recognized was actually was creating more of a codependency in my relationship by having him hold this space of healing for me. So what I started to do was recognize that I needed to build my own self-pleasure practice. And so whenever I would do that, I was right, I know I need to masturbate to delve into this. So I'd sit down, I'd be with myself, and I would try to just go straight to my genitals and rub and play in that area so I could start creating some pleasure. And what I was noticing, I was there's nothing happening here. There was this numbness. And as I've started to unpack this journey, what I recognized was there was actually a lot of what I was experiencing when I was with partners was adrenaline, an overrunning of the subtler sensations that were happening in my body, and creating polarity so that I could have an experience. So a lot of the sexual experience I was enjoying with other people post this abusive relationship was more to do with the connections I was feeling with them rather than actually having the pleasure in my body. So once the honeymoon period died off, it would be very difficult for me to have a sexual connection with anybody, because I would just start to feel numbness and I'd start to struggle and feel pressured. And so this became the journey of me learning how to be with myself. And when I started to touch myself, I would be like, why can't I feel anything? And you know, when I did like feel particularly horny and was able to orgasm, it was like quite quick and like it was over and done with, and it was like, and I would compare it to the sex that I was having with partners and be like, well, it's just rubbish, there's no point in doing it, and I would rather just wait and just have a partner. So it was just this very clouded idea of what self-pleasure could be. And what I started to recognize, and I had a breakup with a partner, was that I would never actually process any of my emotions through my body. What was happening was I'd actually process them all through my head. And so that looks a lot like me being that friend that you may also know in your life that just talks a lot, and just repeats the same things over and over again and doesn't actually deal with any of the problems. So it's just like regurgitating the same stories, staying in my stories, staying in victim, and not actually processing any of the emotion in my body because I was too scared to be with the heartbreak that I could feel inside of me. So it was during this period that I started to realize that I wanted to create exploration and be in my self-pleasure practice, but I didn't want to be alone in that, because being with my emotions, or actually sitting down alone with my emotions, was so much for me to do. So I asked some of my girlfriends to come to self-pleasure with me so that we could have this process. And you know, what the agreement was is that we started to create was that we wouldn't comfort each other and stop if one other person was crying or having an experience. What we would do is just allow ourselves to be in the experience, and just know that by staying in the room and staying with our own practice, that we would be supporting one another. So this actually helped me cultivate the energy that allowed myself to go deeper into my practice. And from there, I started to recognize that I could do this on my own if I could actually be with the emotions that were there and recognize the sensations and have that awareness. And by being in a room full of my sisters, what was happening is that they were, their breath, when I was getting panicky or when I was getting deeper emotions coming up, their breath would actually bring me back to center and center me back in my body. And so what I've created here is I've created my self-pleasure circles, and what I've created for the online program is a way of noticing what's coming up as every time you self-pleasure. So I've created these prompts that will bring you back into your body so that you can understand what's happening for yourself. So self-pleasure for me now is no longer this process of what I see with a lot of my clients when they come in, where they're just holding their breath, bypassing all of their emotions, and sending their energy down into their genitals. And when they do that, what they're doing is sending it all down into the clitoris often, and the clitoris has 8,000 nerve endings on a piece of tissue about this size. So when we're sending all that energy down into that space, we are holding the breath, sending all that energy, and it's just exploding. And when all of that energy is being sent into that tiny pea-sized piece of tissue, it's just becoming, it comes too sensitive to touch afterwards. And actually it's leaving the body so quickly that the pleasure is not able to move through the body. So what we need to be doing is actually creating breath, sound and movement to actually move the energy through the body. And so my encouragement for you is to notice whatever habitual patterns you have when you start to come into your self-pleasure practice, and notice what comes up within that 30 minutes. So instead of viewing this as like a orgasm or goal-orientated practice towards pleasure, this is a practice of self-awareness. It's basically a meditation that you're doing with your body. So when you're dropping into that practice, it's like you're not needing to go straight to your genitals and touch your genitals and have that orgasm and then wonder what you're going to do for the rest of the 25 minutes that I've set for you, or 30 minutes of pleasure practice. You're going to be with yourself in whatever way that looks like. So it might just be sitting in meditation and breathing. It might be more of a dance, it might be more moving, it might be connecting to the body in whatever way feels right for you. And it may be stimulating the genitals in whatever way feels right for you. But it's just taking your time and allowing your energy to be whatever it is. And if you do end up having that orgasm within the first 5 minutes or 10 minutes of the practice, sitting with yourself for the rest of the 20 minutes, seeing what arises. How does your body feel after that orgasm? How does your body feel just before that orgasm? What is there in your body when you are experimenting and exploring these different parts of yourself. So yeah, as I was speaking to my story, it's like this, it's been this process of really changing how I go about feeling what's happening in my body. So for me, it was such a habitual thing when I did start to masturbate that I would just want to have an orgasm straight away, or want to like not feel anything that was happening or coming on. So as soon as I'd orgasm, I'd be straight out the door, or and I would never have any awareness of what stories were coming up or where I was hiding from myself. And once I started to tap into these little things that were coming up throughout the self-pleasure practice, and start to discuss with my friends and journal with myself about what was actually happening in this practice, this is when I started to see where the blocks were in my life. I started to recognize when I was holding my breath that this was showing up in in reactive spaces in my life. So if anybody had a conflict with me, or if anybody was mad around me, or they were stressed, I could see myself take on those emotions. And that would be because I wasn't in tune with my breath, and I didn't have the awareness that was happening in my breath. So I call it the mirror effect, actually, where what we can create through our self-pleasure practice is becoming the stronger mirror. So if I do my self-pleasure practice in the morning, and then I go into work that day, and I meet my boss who is super stressed and buzzing around the office, and he says to me, and he's putting all his stress into the space, and I haven't done the self-pleasure practice, what will often happen is that I'll just be sucked into that stress, and I'll be taking it on. I'll feel like I have to do something, and I'll feel my energy is coming up, and I feel stressed too. Whereas if I've done my self-pleasure practice and I've been with all my emotions and I recognize my breath, when I go into that space with anybody, whether it be my boss, friends, or whoever's stressed around me, what I can create is awareness of what's happening in my body when somebody else is stressed around me. So what I'm cultivating through that is an understanding of how I'm showing up in the rest of my life. And there's power in that. Because when we start to be able to choose how we act rather than react, then we can actually create empowerment in every area of our life. And this is how we create that self-pleasure for success. By tuning into the places that we see the blocks in our self-pleasure practice, we can see them in every area. So for instance, I also had a lot of throat tightness. If I was ever in conflict with somebody, I'd feel like my throat would tighten up, and I wouldn't be able to speak my truth or communicate from a place of calm and stillness. And where I recognized this is actually I was holding my sound back a lot during sex and also during my masturbation. So the more I tapped into these sounds and actually allowed any sound to come out of my body, and this wasn't just like the moans and groans of sexual pleasure, it was just whatever felt natural to come through in that moment. So it could just be like a singing or just a humming, whatever it is, just to get that started and to open up the throat so we can open up the other centers in the body. So really what I've been wanting to share with you is like this self-pleasure practice that you are coming into it with me right now is really around how to be with every part of yourself. Emotional, physical, energetic. Everything that's going on for you is going to come up in this practice. And instead of retracting from it and hiding away from it, it's just staying curious, staying expansive to the experience that you're having. And as you observe that, you start to create the tools that you can see of how you can unfold and create change in all these areas. Okay guys, if you have any questions, please get in contact. And if not, I'll see you next week. Thank you.